Hello and welcome to a brand new video. My name is Salko and today we are finally going to install Pydio. So this video is the last video in the series where I'm installing certain things on Raspberry Pi, so I'm making this perfect little tiny server. Anyway, I know you guys are pretty anxious, so let's start. Just to quickly show you where we are at the moment. So we have installed a web server, an SQL server, phpMyAdmin for managing that SQL server, an FTP server, a mail server, which was one of my longest videos up to date. Even I can't believe it, hour and a half, even longer than an hour and a half. DNS server, and now we are here, Pydio. So we are going to do it now. I will quickly show you also some of the steps that we are going to take. So this is basically what we are going to do. We have about 7-8 steps. Eighth step would be run the Pydio installation script, and yeah, that's pretty much it. 8 steps. You can download Pydio from this link here. I will share this, of course, in the description. And then we're going to generate a couple of keys. Also, so a key and a certificate pair. We're also going to generate the Diffie-Helman group. I know you probably know it, but in case someone doesn't know, Diffie-Helman basically determines the strength of the key which is going to be used, and we're going to be using the 2048-bit key strength, so pretty strong. Then we're going to make some changes in the default Pydio configuration because our default configuration doesn't quite work okay with the Raspberry Pi setup that we have at the moment. We need to also, because of this, create a temporary folder called sessions in the TMP folder, and where these sessions are going to be stored, because this is why we are uncommenting this. And then we need to configure nginx to basically host Pydio. We need to add a new vhost, and we need to also add all of these certificates that we have generated and the Diffie-Helman group. And we also add some security settings to make our server a bit stronger while handling Pydio. After this, we're going to open phpMyAdmin, and we're going to create a new user for Pydio, and there will be the location where Pydio will store its settings and some of the data, etc., and then we're going to finally run the Pydio installation script. So that's the plan, and now let's execute that plan. So I have already downloaded Pydio into my var www.html folder. If you remember, this is where our root is. This is where all of our websites are. So now I'm just going to extract it. So it's a zip file. So unzip Pydio core. In case you guys don't have the zip program on Raspberry Pi, just type apt-get install zip or unzip, and it should work. Anyway, just a side note, if you guys are planning on using all of these things that we have configured up to now, so everything from web server to the file sharing server, I suggest you get the fastest possible SD card that you can use, because I've noticed that sometimes the card can be slow because of all of these IOPS that are being performed on it. So there is that option of installing the boot loader onto an SD card, and then you can actually transfer your file system where you store everything, the configuration files, the home folders, everything, onto an external hard drive. And if you guys want, I can also make a video on that topic. It's probably not that difficult. I haven't tried it yet, but I think it's pretty easy. But anyway, more on that in the comments, so if you have any questions, ask. Now Pydio has been extracted. As you can see, I have a folder called Pydio core 6.4.2. So I'm going to just rename it to Pydio. So sorry, not rename, move Pydio to Pydio, like this. I'm a bit tired, I apologize, it's been a long day. So as you can see, now we have a folder called Pydio, and this is the file where we extracted it from. We can remove this now safely, so remove pydio-core. So now we are left with the Pydio folder. Let's enter this folder and let's see what we have inside here. So you see, this is the whole Pydio application. Let's call it application, okay? Now let's generate the key and certificate pair. You do this by running this command using openssl, copy, paste, enter. It will store these keys inside etc/ssl private, and then it's going to be called, they're going to be called like this. The key is going to be called nginx-selfsigned.key, and then the certificate is going to be called nginx-selfsigned.crt. I have already generated them, so I will not generate them now. After you generate them, it's actually pretty fast. You go and you enter the 2-letter country code, a couple of information, a couple of details about yourself, your name, your email, etc. And then you need to run the Diffie-Helman generation. Now, before you run this, I need to warn you, it's going to take about 20 minutes, even more. I don't know. I haven't really kept track of time, but I've noticed that most of these things, most of these commands, most of these servers utilize usually only one core. So I have a Raspberry Pi 3, so it's a quad-core CPU, and it's utilizing only 25% whenever I'm doing something CPU intensive. So bear that in mind. Anyway, once you generate the Diffie-Helman group, it's also going to be stored here inside etc/ssl certificates. Now that we have generated all of these things, we need to go inside this folder. So inside Pydio, inside the bootstrap _conf.php, and we need to uncomment this file here. So we can go right now, conf bootstrap conf.php. So the line is located over here, temp sessions, uncomment this line. Make sure you don't uncomment this line as well, just this line. If you uncomment this one, Pydio will not work okay, or at all. So it says here, store the sessions, so the session save path, store them inside Pydio's home folder, home data folder, which is basically var www pydio data, and then inside data folder we have tmp and sessions. So Control XY. As you can see, we are currently located inside the data folder, and inside the data folder we have tmp, and it's going to store those sessions inside here, a folder called sessions. So we need to create that folder. Now, how to do it? Well, move yourself inside the tmp folder, type mkdir sessions, and let's give the ownership of this folder to the process which is being run by nginx. It's called data, so the user. Nginx runs with the user called www-data. So data user and www-data group sessions. So now if I check, we see that www-data owns this folder. Okay, let's go out. So this is step 5 already. we are going through this pretty fast. Now we need to configure nginx to use the certificates and add security modifications. So these are the certificate and key pair that we have generated. This is the Diffie-Helman group that we have generated. So we are going to include all of these things inside the configuration file inside nginx, where we are going to configure our Pydio website. Also, these things here, as I mentioned before, are some improvement settings for nginx so that your website, so that your Pydio is a bit more secure. So we are going to disable a couple of SSL protocols, and we are going to change certain settings, and nginx should run more secure. And let's copy these things, and let me show you where you can add them. So if you remember, nginx stores its configuration inside nano etc nginx sites enabled, and then if you remember, we have created this file called default, and inside the default we have configured a couple of things, the PHP and all of these other things. Now we are going to create another file called Pydio. So when someone is trying to access Pydio, based on the settings which we will configure inside, so the domain name and etc., then nginx will know how to treat and where to find this website on your Raspberry. So imagine if I had my domain name called salcohd.com, I could create a file here called salcohd.com and then specify inside that file that if someone calls that website, calls that domain, then open this in this folder. And then I could also create another file here. These are called vhosts, by the way, virtual hosts. I could create another file called I don't know, my fancy special web site.com, and inside there I could configure it and tell nginx, if someone accesses my nginx through that domain, where to point on the actual file system, which website to call. So we are now going to configure nginx, and we're going to tell nginx, if someone tries to access nginx using this domain, pydio.salcohd.com, what to do. So as you can see, we have two server blocks. One server block is here, a very small one, and then there's a big server block right below. So the first block here is created intentionally if someone tries to access Pydio without HTTPS. So if someone tries to access Pydio using HTTP, which is not secure, of course. And then we have a command here which says rewrite that request and add HTTPS in front of it, and then add whatever was given as the server name and after the domain name if someone is trying to access a link which has something else. Let's say someone shares a file and by some mistake the HTTPS is changed to HTTP, then nginx is smart enough to rewrite that request and add HTTPS and whatever else behind that. And now the bigger server block is the actual HTTPS website. So this one is running on port 80. Port 80, as you know, is the default port for web servers which are running on using HTTP protocol, which is not very secure for us at the moment. Everything should run through HTTPS in my opinion. So here we have the HTTPS block. So as you can see, the server name again, pydio.salcohd.com, you're going to replace this with your own domain name. Then we have the location on the actual server where this website is stored. Then we have the first file which will be called when someone tries to open the website, so index.php. Then we tell nginx, okay, use port 443, which is for HTTPS and SSL. And then if you see here, this is where we tell nginx where to store its logs. So the logs are inside var log, nginx access log, and the error log. So you can check who was accessing your Pydio from here. You have the IP address and all these things. And if you have some errors, you can find errors inside this file. And here are our settings, which I copied just now from that file. Okay. And you can paste them here. By the way, I'm just going to copy paste this whole configuration file, so you can just modify it and paste it inside your own nginx. but I'm just explaining to you now what these things mean so you are not lost when you're looking at this configuration. By the way, I'm going to remove this resolver block here. This is for my DNS, but you guys don't need it, and even I don't need it. So okay, moving on. So this is pretty much, from here on, is standard stuff. We're telling nginx what's the maximum size of a file which can be uploaded. I don't recommend using more than, I don't know, 512 megabytes or maybe 256 megabytes, because the Raspberry Pi can get choked. Then we have a couple of settings to do rewrites in case someone is trying to access certain folders. This configuration comes from Pydio's own website, and you can find it if you type on Google install Pydio Debian, and you will find this configuration, which was recommended by the developers from Pydio. Over here is a standard PHP configuration block, which we also found in our previous configuration when we were installing nginx in my previous video. I will link it so you can, if you guys don't know how to install nginx, you will find that information in my previous videos. So this is basically, we are telling nginx over here how it can communicate with PHP. So if someone tries to open a PHP file using nginx, nginx needs to know which program on the Raspbian system to ask and to give this file for processing. So we are passing those files using this socket here called php5-fpm socket. And then we have some caching for icons and CSS files and JavaScript files. And that's pretty much it. This is the whole configuration file for Pydio. Remember, change your domain name here. Also, if you have stored your website in a different folder, change it here. Also, if you have generated your SSL certificate and key pair and Diffie-Helman group, change also this. But if you have followed the tutorial as it is, then you can leave everything as it is. Control X, Y, enter, and you can just restart etc init.d nginx restart. If nginx doesn't give any feedback, so if you don't receive any errors, then nginx should be working okay. Where are we now? So we are currently here. Add the SQL user. As you know, Pydio needs to store its configuration somewhere, and not just the configuration, there are some other things which Pydio is storing inside the SQL database. Now, if you remember, we have installed in the previous videos, we have installed MySQL and phpMyAdmin, which is managing this SQL database, so you don't have to do everything from the command line. And I have opened the phpMyAdmin. If you are opening it from the same Raspberry Pi machine, just type localhost/phpMyAdmin. If you're opening phpMyAdmin from another PC, from a Windows or a Mac PC, just type the name, so the IP address of your Raspberry Pi machine. So my IP address is 10.69.69.62/phpMyAdmin, and you should open phpMyAdmin like this. Type in your username, type in your password, and phpMyAdmin is here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a user called Pydio and a database called Pydio, and user Pydio will have permissions to read and write from that database. So click here where it says users, and as you can see, I have a user called Pydio already here. So I have already created it, but let me just show you how you can create another user. It doesn't matter. Add user. So I'm accessing it directly from the Raspberry Pi, and it's a bit slower. If I were to do this on my Windows machine, it would be very snappy. So username, I'm gonna call it Pydio2 because I already created one Pydio account. Host, we select localhost. Password, let's say create a password, whatever you want. Retype it so you don't make a mistake. You could also generate a password if you are if you like, let's say, security and not using some dictionary password, etc. But That's pretty much it. Now over here you can select a database for a user. So you can create a database with the same name and grant all privileges. This is what I like to do if I'm just going to create one database for this user. But if you think that this user will need more than one database, then you could select this option and the user could create an X amount of databases, which would begin, which would basically end with, so they would begin with his username and then underscore and then the name of the database which the user has generated. But in my case, I know that I'm gonna create just one database for Pydio. So I'm just gonna select here, create database with the same name and grant all privileges. That's pretty much it. So I have selected this option and over here, I'm just gonna click go. And after this, it says, this is the actual command which is run if I were to do this on the inside the command line. Well, not exactly, because I wouldn't put with max queries, with max connections and all these things. But yeah, this is the command and this is what was actually executed just now in the background. So now we have a user called Pydio2 and the password is here. Well, it's not visible, luckily, but you know what's your password. Okay, let's now try to install Pydio. Pydio.zalcohd.com, right? Remember this one? Okay, how will how will my server know where this domain is? Okay, you remember we have installed bind in the previous video, so the DNS server. Okay, great. But now, since I'm responsible for this domain, zalcohd.com, I need to tell bind to create this subdomain, right? I need to go and create the subdomain pydio.zalcohd.com, right? If you guys are using your own DNS server, then you can create your own subdomain and then just point it to your Raspberry Pi. But since we are actually hosting our domain on our own server, we need to do it here. Where to do it? Nano etc bind etc bind db.zalcohd.com. I have already went and created the subdomain called Pydio, and it's pointing, so this is the A record, it's pointing to my private IP. You guys will put your public IP address here, and don't forget to forward the port on your router to this IP. So if you guys are using an external IP address, just put it here, and then just open the port on your router and forward that port to this local IP address, the IP address of your Raspberry Pi. If you guys don't understand something, if you have any questions, just ask me in the comments, ask me on Twitter, you can send me an email, whatever. After creating an A record, you're pretty much done. Now we need to tell our server to actually use this DNS server. I remember we created the DNS server, but I didn't actually show you how you can tell your system to use it. I might have, but I actually forgot. But let's do it again anyway. So inside Raspbian, go to nano etc network interfaces, press enter, edit this file, and over here add this line DNS-name servers and then specify this IP address. This is how you actually configure a static IP address for your ETH0 interface. So you can copy this and then just change the values to your values which you have. But here I have told my server to use this DNS server as the default one for the whole system and not to use the router one, so the one from the router or the Google DNS servers or whatever. Next thing, once we do this, we need to actually shut down the interface, the ETH0. So I'm going to turn off this interface, flush the DNS cache, and then bring the interface back up. So how to do this? Well, simple. If down force ETH0. So with this command, I'm forcing the interface down. Then I'm gonna type this IP address flush device ETH0. With this, I'm going to flush basically DNS cache and all these things. And then if up force eth0, and I'm gonna bring the interface back up. As you can see, there's an X here now, but it should bring itself up, and now you guys should start using your bind server as the default DNS server for your Raspberry Pi server. If config, it's up. Now if I try to ping my domain, pydio.salcoag.com, see, it's resolving to my internal IP address. Excellent. So now I can start with the installation. And we can continue with the installation. If we go down to the bottom, we see everything is okay. It says here, click here to continue to Pydio. I seriously don't know how to pronounce this. Pydio. Okay, start wizard. Let's start with the installation wizard. Why not? It's a bit slow if you're running it directly on the Raspberry Pi, but if you do it on another machine, it's much faster. So the title, the welcome message, sorry, administrator login. So we can create a user called, I don't know, admin. The full name could be Mr. Administrator. The password, I'm just gonna put admin for now. Okay, it's too short, so no, I will not put admin for now. Let me put a password. Doesn't matter what kind of password. You should remember this password because this is the most important password for you guys. So username is admin, full name Mr. Administrator, the password is my password. Now let me continue the second part. And here we come to the Pydio MySQL connection. If you remember, I created a username called Pydio2 with a database called Pydio2. So let's just add them. You guys have probably created a different user and a different database name, so you can just put this. Don't select to use MySQL. Let's test the connection if it works okay. This should be pretty quick, usually. Access denied for Pydio2 at a local host. Let me see if I type the password correctly. Connection established. Okay, so I mistyped the password. Okay, encoding, enable emails. We can do this later. Just let's install Pydio for now. So Pydio is being installed. Okay, page will now reload. Your username is admin. And that's pretty much it. Installation has completed. Now I should be redirected to the Pydio front page where I can then log in. Okay, so I think my username was admin. Let me see if I already forgot the password. I guess I did not forget the password. Seriously, if you do this from another PC, it's much faster. And we're in. This is Pydio. So you have common files, my files, shared files. If you want an in-depth explanation about how Pydio works, place a comment. If you want me to show you how you can also use Pydio on your phone, there's also a desktop client for Windows over here, so you can download it and install it, but I think you guys can figure that one out. If you have liked this video, please like it. If not, you know what to do. Also, if you have any questions, please ask me. I'm available on Twitter, on Facebook, on email, so you guys can get in touch. And yeah, this is pretty much it. So thank you guys for watching, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it. It means a world to me. So thank you and peace.